Hey everyone, this is Guru Das Adipu, lecturer in Marketing Management, Government City College, Nayapur, Hyderabad. Today we will discuss the topic learning. Okay, learning is one of the important psychological process determining the human behavior. The complex way in which the human being behave is all learned. If we want to explain and predict behavior, we need to understand how people learn. The psychologists say that human beings, unlike animals, possess an extremely high proportion of unused mental capacity at birth. It is, of course, unfavorable in the initial years because he will feel helpless. But in the latter years, as we grow older, this unused mental capacity will help us in adapting to change conditions and circumstances. This unused mental capacity will be used with the help of learning. In fact, practically all human beings' behavior is either directly, indirectly affected by learning. For example, a worker's skill, a person's mode of dress, his attitude or his way of speaking are all learned. Learning process and principles help in improving the behavior of the employees. And now we will discuss the meaning and definition of learning. In a layman's view, learning is something we did when we went to school. Okay. In reality, each of us is continuously going to school and learning. Okay, is occurring all the time. With the every new experience, new event, or new situation, we learn something. But this concept of learning is purely theoretical. We cannot observe learning as we can observe the personality of a person or his attitude. We can uh, see changes taking place, but not the learning itself. Right? Learning is used in many contexts. Simply speaking, learning refers to this modification of behavior through practice, training, and experience. Right, we will now see a few important definitions given by different psychologists. Learning is one is according to E.R. Hilgard. Learning is a okay, relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of a prior experience. Right. According to WMC Gee, learning has taken place if an individual behaves, reacts, and responds as a result of experience in a manner different from the way he formerly behaved. Right. Now we'll see the nature of learning. From the definitions which we have discussed, we find some important implications in learning process. That is, one is change in behavior. Learning involves change in behavior, although the change may be good or bad from an organization point of view. The change in behavior need not be an improvement over the previous behavior, right? Although learning usually connotes improved behavior, right? For example, bad habits like smoking, prejudice, and stereotype are often learned by the individual. Another is change in behavior must be relatively permanent. All the changes do not reflect learning. To constitute learning, change should be relatively permanent. Temporary changes may be only reflective and fail to represent any learning. Any temporary change in behavior caused due to fatigue, drug, or temporary adoptions are not covered in learning. Right? Change must be based on some experience, practice, or training. The behavioral change must be based on some form of practice, experience, or training. Any change in behavior due to physical maturation, any disease or physical damages due to constitute learning. Okay, do not constitute learning. This change may not be evident until a situation arises in which the new behavior can occur. And another factor is reinforcement. The practice or experience must be reinforced in order for learning to occur. Okay. If reinforcement does not accompany the practice or experience, the behavior will eventually disappear. Learning is reflected in behavior. A change in an individual's thought process or attitude not accompanied by behavior is not learning. Right? If it is not accompanied by the behavior, it is not learning. Further, learning needs to result in behavior potentiality and not necessarily in the behavior of itself. For example, if a person is thinking of using drugs but has not actually used them, and he finds out that a friend of his has died because of drugs, he will never get involved with drugs. This experience has changed his behavioral potential. Right? And now we'll discuss theories of learning. Okay. A theory of learning would be able to explain all aspects of learning, how, when, and why learning occurs. Okay, should have universal application. Learning should have universal application and should be able to predict and control learning situations. There are four general approaches to learning. One is classical conditioning, and the other is operant conditioning. Third is cognitive learning. The last one is social learning. We will discuss each and every theory in detail. First, we will discuss classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is the association of an event with another desired event resulting in a behavior. The most well-known experiments on classical conditioning were conducted by Ivan Pavlov, the Russian psychologist who won the Nobel Prize for his experiment on this subject. Pavlov conducted an experiment on dogs and tried to establish a stimulus response, that is SR connection we call it as. He tried to relate the dog's salvation and the ringing of bell. Right? In his experiments, he put some meat in front of dogs. Dogs responded to this stimuli by salivating. This response was instinctive or unconditioned, we call it as unconditioned. Okay. Then Pavlov next began to ring a bell at the same time as the meat was presented. Right? See, he wants to make conditioning. Ringing the bell in itself without the presentation of meat was not connected to any responses. Right? But by ringing the bell at the same time as presentation of meat, Pavlov established a relationship between the two stimuli, the bell and the meat, in the mind of dogs. By continuing this process, the ringing of bell alone was sufficient stimulus to elicit a response of salivating even when no meat was presented. Thus, the bell became a conditioned stimulus, resulting in conditioned or learned response. Right? The if you observe, okay, if you observe it, caused the dog to react in a certain way. That is, ringing the bell, presenting the meal, made it habituated, and it caused the dog to react in a certain way. That is, noticeable increase in salvation when bell is ringing. This reaction is called the unconditioned response. The bell was an artificial stimulus or conditioned stimulus, but when the bell was paired with meat, and a conditioned stimulus, it eventually produced a response. Right? After conditioning, the dog started salivation in response to the ringing of the bell alone. Thus, conditioned stimulus led to conditioned response. Stimulus response, we call it as. In an organizational setting, we can See classical conditioning, okay, operation classical conditioning. For example, at one manufacturing plant, every time the top executives from the head office would make a visit, the plant management would clean up the administrative offices and wash the windows. This went on for years. Eventually, employees would turn on their best behavior and look, okay, uh, prime and proper, okay, look prime and proper whenever the windows were cleaned, even on those occasions when the cleaning was not paired with the visit from, okay, from the top boss, from the top boss, right? People had learned to associate the learning of windows with the visit from the head office. Classical conditioning represents only a very small part of total human learning, so it has a limited value in the study of organizational behavior. Classical conditioning plays only a passive role. We will react in a particular way only if something happens, but in reality, the behavior of people in organizations is voluntary rather than being reflexive. Their behavior is not elicited in response to a specific identifiable event, but it is generally emitted. The learning of complex behavior can be better understood by looking at operant conditioning. Right? We'll see what is operant conditioning. Operant is defined as behavior that produces effect. Okay, operant is defined as behavior that produces effect. Operant conditioning is based on the work of B.F. Skinner, who advocated that individuals emit responses that are rewarded and will not emit responses that are either not rewarded nor punished. Operant conditioning argues that behavior is a function of its consequences. Right? Behavior is likely to be repeated if the consequences are favorable. Behavior is not likely to be repeated, okay, if the consequences are unfavorable. Thus, the relationship between behavior and consequence is the essence of operant condition. Right? Based uh, upon this, the direct relationship between the consequences and the behavior. The management can study and identify this relationship and try to modify and control behavior. Hence, certain types of consequences can be used to increase the occurrence of desired behavior, and other types of consequences can be used to decrease the occurrence of desired behavior. One can see examples of operant condition in the organizations. For instance, working hard and getting the promotion will probably cause the person to keep working hard in the future. On the other hand, if a boss assures his subordinates that he would be suitably compensated in the next performance appraisal, provided the employee works, okay, overtime. However, when the evaluation time comes, the boss does not fulfill his assurance to his subordinates, even though the latter had okay, worked overtime. Next time, the subordinate coolly declines to work overtime when the boss requests him to do so. Okay, thus it can be concluded that the behavior consequences that are rewarding increase the rate of response, while the adverse consequences decrease the rate of response. Okay, next. Operant conditioning techniques are extensively used in clinical and educational research. Control of alcoholism and control of deviant children in a classroom. Okay, best suitable way to use the operant conditioning theorem. Right, another one is cognitive learning. The pioneer of cognitive learning theory is Edward Tolman, he developed and tested his theory through controlled experiments. Okay, he developed and tested his theory through controlled experiments. Using rats in his laboratory, he showed that they learned to run through a complicated maze towards their goal of food. Following, uh, it was observed that rats developed expectations at every choice point in the maze. Thus, they learn to expect that certain cognitive cues are reward related to the okay, choice point could ultimately lead to food. Right? The learning took place when the relationship between the cues and expectancy was strengthened because the cues led to expected goals. The cognitive theory recognizes the role of an organism in receiving, memorizing, retrieving, and interpreting the stimulus and reacting to it. The cognitive explanation of learning differs from classical conditioning, stimulus response learning, and operant conditioning, that is response stimulus learning. Right? Another, according to Tolman, cognitive approach could be termed as stimulus approach. That is, one stimulus led to another. Cognitive learning is achieved by thinking about the perceived relationship between events and individual goals and expectations. Cognitive theory of learning assumes that the organisms learns the meaning of various objects and events, and learned responses depends upon the meaning assigned to stimuli. Cognitive theories argue that the learner forms a cognitive structure in memory, okay, which perceives and organizes information about the various events which occur in a learning situation. When a test is conducted to determine how much has been learned, the subject must encode the test stimulus and scan it again against his memory to determine an appropriate action. What is done will be depend upon cognitive structure retrieved from memory. Right? Today, cognition theory is very much alive and relevant. In organizational behavior, the cognitive approach has been applied mainly to motivation theories. Right? Expectations, attributions, and locus of control, okay, and goal setting are all cognitive concepts and represent the purposefulness of organizational behavior. Many researchers are currently concerned about the relationship or connection between cognition and organizational behavior. Next, social learning. Individuals can learn by observing what happens to other people and just by being told about something, as well as by direct experiences. Much of what we have learned comes from observing and imitating models, okay, parents, teachers, peers, superiors, film stars, and so on. This view that we can learn through both observation and direct experience has called social learning theory. This theory assumes that learning is not a case of environmental determinism, it is classical or operant conditioning, or of individual determinism, that is not cognitive view. Okay, that means cognitive view. Rather, it is blending of both. Thus, social learning theory emphasizes the interactive nature of cognitive, behavioral, and environmental determinants. Right? The influence of model is central to the social learning viewpoint. Right? Four processes have been found to determine the influence that a model will have on an individual. Right? That is attention process. Attention process. People learning from a model only when they recognize and pay attention to its critical features. We tend to be most influenced by models that are attractive repeatedly available, important to us, are similar to us. Okay, that is similar to use in our estimation. And another is retention. A model's influence will depend upon how well the individual remember the model's action after the model is no longer readily available. That is what we call it as retention. Motor production process. After a person has been in new behavior by observing the model, the watching must be converted to doing. This process then demonstrates that the individual can perform the model activities. And fourth is reinforcement process. Individuals will be motivated to exhibit the modeled behavior if positive incentives or reward are provided. Behaviors that are positively reinforced will be given more attention, better, and perform more often. And we'll see the principles of learning. Learning is a very complex and wide topic. When we talk about learning, it can be referred to any type of learning from simple alphabets to designing a computer system. Okay, we may learn everything following principles. We need to here in the slide you will see the formal training situation, principles of learning in formal training situation. One is feedback. Learning can be a more effective process when both the instructor and trainee give feedback to each other. The instructor needs feedback to know how the trainee is progressing, and the trainee needs the feedback to how is the level of performance. The second is active learning. Learning can be more effective and quick if the trainee is actively involved in the learning process. We always learn by doing. Okay, this applies to all forms of learning. And the third is reinforcement. According to this principle, learning which is rewarded is more likely to be retained. This is how we make our children, students, and even our pets learn. Okay, a meaningful material. The material supplied to the trainee should be meaningful. He can understand and learn more if the material supplied is related to his existing knowledge. Multiple sense learning. The Chinese proverb, one picture is worth 1,000 words, is another way of uh, stating this principle. The presentation method which makes use of two or more senses are more effective than using one sense only. Right? The most important sense for learning are sight and hearing. Right? Over learning, if an individual frequently makes attempts to recall the learned material, forgetting is reduced and the material is memorized in his brain. Right? And another is primary and recency. This principle states that the trainee can recall those things they learn first and lost in sequence. This principle does not hold true in all conditions, and sometimes they act against one another. Example, when the most recent impressions change or blot out first impressions. Okay. Next, we will discuss determinants of learning. Okay. Important factors that determine learning are: one is motive. Motives are the drives which prompt people to take action. Motives are generally subjective and represent the mental feelings of human beings. Motives are dynamic in nature and determine the direction of an individual's behavior. Learning cannot occur without motives. Learning is complete only when motives are fully realized and translated. Okay, and the second is stimuli. Stimuli are the objects that exist in the environment in which a person lives. These are those objects and languages which draw attention of people. Employees get stimuli from the actions of their superiors. Okay, the stimuli increase the probability of eliciting a specific response from a person. Stimuli can be of two types: generalization and discrimination. Generalization takes place when the similar new stimuli repeat in the environment. When two stimuli are exactly alike, they will, in all probability, elicit a specific performance. When the stimuli are alike, the manager can easily predict the human behavior. In case of discrimination, responses vary to different stimuli because of individual differences in various aspects. Discrimination has wide application in organizational behavior. Yet reinforcement is another determinant. Repeated action is reinforcement. Reinforcement may be positive, negative, punishment, and extinction. Reinforcement can be defined as anything that tends to increase the strength of response and induces a repetition of behavior that preceded the reinforcement. Effective modification of a behavior cannot take place without reinforcement. Learners learn as per their perception level. Generally, positive reinforcement is more effective for making permanent changes in behavior. And another is attention. Another determinant of learning is the degree of attention of learners. The degree of attention depends upon the nature of stimuli. All stimuli are not paid attention to. Career-oriented stimuli are generally accepted by employees. The personality levels of individuals influence their desires to learn and motives for need fulfillment. Okay, and another is recognition. The stimuli which are generally paid attention to by the individuals are recognized as acceptable factors of learning. When employees pay attention to stimuli, they recognize it for learning purposes. The level of recognition depends upon the level of values, preferences, need, and desires of individuals. Employees regard unambiguous activities, right? And another determinant is retention. Retention means remembrance of learned behavior over time. Permanent retention becomes a habit which helps in continuous improvement in behavior and performance. Habit helps in development of capability and capacity of individuals. Habits translate theoretical knowledge into practice. And another determinant is efforts. Okay, efforts made by individuals are another determinant of learnings. Efforts are automatic outcomes of good habits. Okay, that's why people say that we should inculcate good habits in your child. Right? Habits become the stimuli for learning after development of standards of the employees. Last one is a reward. Reward is very important determinant of learning. Okay, unless there is no reward, people may not learn. Okay, what benefit I will get from learning? People seek benefits to learn. That benefits are called rewards. If after learning process is over, the individuals are offered rewards, the learning process becomes more acceptable, more effective. Rewards may be monetary or non-monetary. Don't think that monetary rewards only make the people to learn. Learning can be motivated. Learning can be rewarded with monetary and non-monetary terms. The behavior of the employees decide the level and form of reward. The level and form of reward. The reward reinforcement makes employees learn more than positive reinforcement behavior. That reward reinforcement, if you provide, if they have okay, learn something, okay, that is beneficial. In case of organization, okay, practice makes them to work in more effective manner, okay, that will definitely contribute to the output of the organization, right? Hence reward must be reinforced. Okay, reward reinforcement makes employee learn more than positive reinforcement behavior. They want to again and again perform the same and become expertise in that particular thing, and that definitely constitutes the organization, right? Thank you. With this I conclude the session. Thank you for listening patiently. Okay, see you. Bye.